I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to our Bible study this morning. Good to see you. And I'm a little uncomfortable this morning. I think the table has moved up and I'm feeling a little cramped. So if I stumble around up here and bump into stuff, y'all just bear with me. Tom, I'm going to be really close to y'all today, so don't worry about that. If you have your Bibles, I'd like to invite you to turn to Luke chapter 14. We're going to be in really two small parables today, so we're going to have to really do some serious discussion today because these are very short parables, and we'll be starting around, I think that's verse 25, and it's the parable of the Rash Builder and the king at war. And what's happening here, Jesus is talking about the cost of discipleship. And I think that's a good lesson for us because I think in the church, and there's nothing wrong with this, we want to get everybody baptized, but do we talk about the cost of being a Christian? Let's get them in and get them baptized, and then we'll teach them. And that's true. I don't have a problem with that, but I think sometimes we might miss the point of the price of being a Christian. And I think a lot of it has to do, we're here in this country here, we don't have any persecution to say. Yes, we get made fun of, but they say words never hurt, and I don't know who come up with that because words do hurt. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Well, they do hurt. And sometimes we open our big old mouths and we stick our foot in there, and words do hurt. So that's about the worst that I can think of that we have to do with here in this country. I don't know of anybody that's being beheaded. I don't know if anybody that's being put in front of the firing squad for being a Christian. Now, I'm not talking about murderers and rapists and grand larceny and all that others. I'm talking about just for being what we are in here today, and that's just for professing the name of Christ. I don't know anybody that's lost their job because they became a Christian. I don't know anybody that was, I can't say that. Some people are shunned, and we'll talk about that today, especially when you have members of the family not of a denomination and their children, or maybe even one of them become a Christian. That causes a lot of hardship sometimes. And we'll talk about that today a little bit, but basically what I'm saying is we got it pretty easy here. We got it pretty easy here. The word's accessible. I'm going to use this word very loosely, but there's a church on every corner, but now it might not be the right one, and I'm not going to talk about that today. We're just going to talk about the cost of being a Christian and how really good, because I tell you, the Romans were awesome at torture. They could torture you in so many different ways. Have anybody here read Fox's Book of Martyrs? If you have a chance, and it's kind of gruesome here and there, but I mean, to talk about the ways that they tortured and killed Christians is unbelievable. All the different ways that they could come up. I mean, you just think, all right, you get shot, you get stabbed, but man, I mean, they really had some crazy things they did to just for being a Christian. And I know that really sounds strange to us, but we do have some things we face today. So let's start in verse 25 here, and I'm just going to read these, and it's not going to take long because they're really short. It says, "Now large crowds were going along with him, and he turned and said to them, 'If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father, mother, wife, children, brother, sister, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which one of you, when he wants to build a tower, does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough to complete it. Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who are watching it will begin to ridicule him, saying, this person began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king, when he sets out to meet another king in battle, will not first sit down and consider whether he is strong enough with 10,000 to face another coming against him with 20,000? Otherwise, while the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and requests terms of peace. So then, here's his conclusion. None of you can be my disciple who does not give up all his own possessions. Actually, I did not realize this, but have y'all ever heard this called the twin parables? I never heard that, but when I was doing some studying, I said, well, sometimes this is referred to as the twin parables. I grew up in the church and all that. I never heard it called the twin parables. So see, even old dogs can learn new tricks. So this is twin parables, and I say that because it's basically the same lesson. He's got two short parables, and you think about this. When we're going to build something, of course, nowadays we can go to the bank and get a loan, so we've pretty much got it covered. But that's not the way, even overseas today, that's not the way it works. They don't get loans. There's no home improvement loan. There's no homeowners loans in a lot of these countries overseas. They build it as they go, or they pay cash, which most of them don't have. So, but today, I mean, we can relate to this either because, okay, my house is going to be $400,000. I'll go to the bank and see how much my monthly payment's going to be. We got it covered. But it wasn't that way. So you've got this guy here who's going to build a tower and probably over the vineyard so he can watch the vineyard, be sure nobody comes in and steals his goods. Doesn't sit down and count the cost. How much is this going to cost me? Do I have enough? And it says first off, so that means it's deliberate. He's planning this out. He's calculating. He's making sure he's got what it takes to cover the cost. And remember now, Jesus is speaking as he's on the way to Jerusalem, and the crowds are following him. And they're thinking, probably like most of them thought at that time, he's going back and we're going to make him king in Jerusalem. See? That's not what Jesus has in mind. You know, I really thought about this week when we look back now 2,000 years later, and it's easy for us to say, well, you know, he was talking about the spiritual kingdom and all this, but you read a lot of the things he was saying, it had dual applications. And so I can't always point my finger and wag at them, to them silly people, how come? And of course now, Jesus, I don't know how they can get around him not being who he says he is with the miracles and stuff he's performed. But a lot of the sayings, and you think about it, you go back in the Old Testament, it talks about the kingdom here and the kingdom there, and that's all they knew. They didn't know anything about the church. All they knew was about the kingdom in the glory days when David and Solomon had the kingdom. We want to go back there. It was great. Kind of like us. We want to go back to the 50s. You know, the church was strong, and we were up and going, and the fastest growing religious body, 50s and 60s. Man, what a great time that was. Some of you know, Brandon, you might not remember that, but most of us in here remember those times. So that's what they were thinking about. We're going to go back. He's going to make it king, and what is that going to cost him if he becomes king? Nothing, really. They're going to return to the glory days. So Jesus is saying, look, if you're going to be my disciple, you're going to follow me, it's going to cost you. And the same with us today. It's going to cost us. So he's letting them know, and he's, you know, and it's not like he hasn't said anything to them before, especially to the 12, you know, especially in Matthew 10. He said, behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves, in verse 16. But beware of men, for they will deliver you up to the councils. They will scourge you in their synagogues, and you shall be brought before the governors and kings for my sake. In verse 17 and 18, you shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. In verse 22, And then even when he sent the 70 out, he says, behold, I send you forth as lambs among wolves. And then when I read stuff like this, what if it really sunk in to the 12? Probably not, I would think. I mean, they've been going along with Jesus. He's been healing the sick and doing all that. He's been preaching about the kingdom, and they have the concept, I think, of the kingdom. But I don't know if they thought about the persecution. Maybe until Christ was crucified, and they're thinking, it happened to him. Could very well happen to us. So he has said things. He's let them know that it's going to cost them. And so he's just asking them. Now, which of you is going to build a tower and not see if he has enough to complete it? Or what about the king? I'm thinking, I got 10,000. I'm going up against 20,000. I don't like those odds. See, so what does he do? First, he calculates. He assesses. He's going to count the cost. And if he don't think he can do it, which I don't think he can do it, what's he going to do? He's going to send a delegation while they're far off. So he ain't going to wait till they come at the gates and they're engaged in battle. He's go, okay, wave the white flag. Okay, I give up. Let's make some terms. Now, see, he's going to send a delegation off where they're far off. Kind of equal footing because, they didn't have satellites and they can say, well, he's got all his guys over here and these people are over there. All they had was visual. They said, well, I'm thinking there's probably, he's probably got 15,000, 20,000 guys over there. So when they go to do the delegation, they might not know what each other has, and he'll kind of have equal footing, so get some favorable terms. But if he's going to wait till the king's up here with 20,000 beating down his castle, his terms aren't going to be good. It might be like total surrender. So he calculates that. So with that in mind, I kind of want to go back here to this verse and to talk about this. In verse 26, he says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father, mother, wife, children, brothers, sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciples. So what I want to talk about in the next few minutes is how does maybe our parents possibly be a hindrance to our Christianity? Because he's going to talk about cost. Well, how will our parents possibly cost us when we're becoming disciples of Christ? And I told you before, I know of a few people that when they became Christians, their parents were of different denominations. They just basically disowned them. You can't do that. We've been this for all our lives, and this is what we are, and now you're doing that. Cut you off. And if you're an adult, a young adult, that might not be too bad. You're able to get out on your own. You may already be on your own, but what if you're still in school? And what if you're still at mom and dad's table? What if mom and dad are hypocrites? We go to church every Sunday, maybe Sunday night, Wednesday night, and then we live like the devil the rest of the time. What does that say? And we wonder about our children, why they don't turn out, or we attended church and we went to the youth functions and we've done all this, and now that 18 and heading away, they don't want anything to do with the church. And brethren, I'll be honest with you, sometimes we can do everything right, and they may still turn out wrong. But I would say that's way on this end, on the very few, the low percentage. Most of it goes over here where mom and dad are attending, but we're not really being Christians. Our kids see that. They understand. Well, I'll just go to church. Do what I want to the rest of the week. I'll just go to church on Sunday, sit in the pew. Don't worry about it. And then we wonder why maybe our kids are losing interest in the church. What kind of example? See, we can fool ourselves. We might be able to fool our families, but, you know, our children, we say, well, they're children, they won't get it, but they do. They do get it. Most of you kids, when you ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, they want to be what either mom or dad is, right? Well, dad was this. I want to do that. Mom was that. I want to do that. Parents, whether you believe it or not, we still have the most influence, and grandparents, over our children. There may be that time where, they listen to their friends, but mom and dad is still the number one influence on our children. Mr. Frank.
Steve, you made a good comparison there when you said, as children, when we look upon our parents and we just see them come to worship, we just see them come to Bible class, but we don't see Christianity in action.
That's right.
As they deal with one another, how they handle situations. We may not see our parents praying.
True.
We may not see them say, hey, let's go back to the Bible, see what God says about this. Or we may not even try to get the kids involved. We talk about ministries, evangelism, but they never see it. And they never see you living out Christianity. So I think about my own upbringing. My family would make sure that we got to worship. May not have been the true worship, but Sunday roll around, you're going to be somewhere. But, for studying the Bible, reading, discussing things, those things do not happen. And I think, as a child, you're trying to build on your foundation, your faith, but you don't have too many examples, to pull from. Even though you might come to worship, throughout the week, but, you never see, let's just start from the top down. Perhaps you don't see the elders doing anything, the deacons, the pew members, the newest converts. So nobody putting Christianity in action, so we just follow suit, say, well, this is how we're supposed to be.
Right. And the funny thing about our children is a lot of them grow up to be just like us. Their mannerisms and the things that they do, the way they end up being a lot like us. And I can remember saying, well, I ain't going to be like my mom and dad. Yeah. Blah, 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 blah. Man, I'm a lot like them. And I think that's kind of what Jesus is getting to here. When you think about your mother, and he says, man, do we not love our parents? And he says, if you love them more than me, you can't be my disciple. You put them first. And he talks about hating here. Now, hating is not, well, I hate my mom and dad. It's loving less or preferring, I like this one, preferring one thing over another. If you prefer your parents over Jesus, it's not going to work. If you prefer your brothers and sisters over Jesus, it won't work. And yes, if you prefer your own life over Jesus. And that's another, I don't want to jump to conclusions, but that's another thing that's so foreign to us, is our own life. But I don't want to get there yet. Any other comments you can think of? Larry Ann and who's got the way back over there on that side? And Linda's got one here too. Only got one? Kelly, over there. We go. Go ahead, Miss Linda.
As you say about the parents, I think about two different people that I studied with. One was a Buddhist, and the other one was my best friend from elementary school. And both of them came to the same conclusion, and that was, I cannot accept what you are saying about my life and my relationship to God, because if I accept that, it means that my parents are lost.
Okay.
And it was just, to this day, it just bothers me, but that was their conclusion.
Yes, and I agree with that in my own family with my wife's parents. And it took a long time for her to accept that her mom and dad were not going to be in heaven. And that's difficult. I mean, we love our parents, and probably, other than our children, there's probably nobody on earth that we love more. And to think about them not going to heaven is very, very, very difficult. Larry Ann?
Is it on?
Yes.
I know I was raised very conservatively with my parents. We always went to church. We never missed anything. We never missed gospel meetings, all of that. But I do know, as you get into even though that's what we want for our children, it's hard in the teenage years and stuff. And I think sometimes well-meaning parents, myself included, that we tend to want our kids to be able to do what they want to do. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, like with different activities and stuff, that they could miss church for this or whatever, that we tend to go with that, even when it's not in our best, even when we know it's not the right thing to do. And then as they get older, that's what they learned, that it's not that big of a deal, that something's not that important. And I also feel like sometimes when our kids are adults, we want to, like, protect them from the consequences of not doing what they should do. Even sometimes in, not wanting others to, I know they're not at church much, but don't mention it, because we don't want them to get, we don't want to turn them off or anything like that. But I think we have to stick with where we're supposed to be.
Oh, and you're going to step on some toes there when we allow our children to do things. I'll just take football. It's going on right now. Baseball. And when are most of the games, especially when you reach the professional, maybe not as much baseball as it is football, when are their games? Sundays. We got the hometown Jaguars right here. What are we saying to our children when we miss services to be at the Jaguar game? Larry Ann brought it up. I'm just a teacher. What if I'm just saying, I'm just using that because everybody I'm sure can relate to that. What if we got, anything like that we place, and that's what Christ is getting, anything that we put ahead of him, we can't be his disciple. See? And that goes a long way. That's what our children see. They say, well, it's okay to go to this, or go to a concert, go to, whatever, pick your sport, pick your recreation. I work all week long. How many times we talk to folks, and I'm just so tired on Sunday. I went out on the boat, or I went fishing all day yesterday. We did this, we did that. I work 6 days a week, and Sunday's my only day to rest. We do it. I'm just too tired. Too tired. There's a comment over here. But those things are important, and what I want us to understand, even as grandparents, what do we do as grandparents? And I'm fixing to be one. How do we influence our grandchildren? And grandparents, I think, have a really big influence on them. Yes, Ken?
This information came to me from a Christian counselor that children follow the path of least resistance, or POLR, especially when they get older. And one sad example of this is if one parent is faithful and the other one falls away, it's so easy for the child to follow the other one, the lazy way, and go that way rather than to follow the Christian.
Yep, and that happens. Just flip that back to Juan there. Mr. Juan.
Yeah, I have a couple I have a couple thoughts
Okay.
on that because it's happened to me several times with people that I've studied. You know, by the time you get to that point, you've covered a lot of scriptures, and you know you're pretty much at like the invitation phase where you're saying, with what you know now, you know what's the right thing to do. But that has come up a lot, and so one of the things that I have used in the past is say, well, let's talk about you for a moment. With what you know, what does God want you to do, and what does God expect you to do? You know, so the answer is obvious. It said, I'm not here to judge your loved ones. Their stories are, you know, written. There's nothing we can do. But assume that this is what God wants you to do, and they're on the wrong side of eternity. As your loved one, what would they want you to do? As if, you know, you love your child. What would you have advised them to do? And what do you think your loved one would have you do? And you'd be surprised how many times they say they'd want me to do this.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And, you know, when he talks about here, all of us got a cross to bear. You know, everybody in here has a cross. Now, not everybody in here has the same cross. We've all got different crosses to bear in our lives. Every one of us. Nobody's cross-free. We all got something we've got to bear. You know, and that's where our brethren come in. You know, we encourage, we uplift, but I don't know what cross you're bearing unless you tell me. And you don't know what cross I'm bearing unless I tell you. But I think a lot of times in the church we don't want to share our dirty laundry. You know, we don't want to let anybody know we got weaknesses, that we've got problems. Hey, how you doing? I'm doing fantastic. I say that a lot, and I am doing pretty good. But you understand what I'm saying? We don't say, well, you know, this week I'm really struggling with this particular problem. Whatever it is. You know? Did you have one, Josh? You had your hand up. Okay.
Okay, so I want to go back. So Aaron and I are in the midst of we're in the deep raising children right now. We have a 17. Y'all can laugh. It's true. We have a 17-year-old, a 12, a 13-year-old, and a 9-year-old. So serious business right now.
Absolutely.
And when I was listening to Larry Ann and thinking about my parents, as most of you know them, and my dad was interesting. You can laugh about that too. I thought about, what about considering them as humans, like as people too? Like my mom always asked me and talked to me and said, Celia, like, how is this going? How you feel? Let's share ideas. Let's explain why the Bible is the way it is. Let's explain why we do what we do, not just say, well, that's just what we do. Or that's just how it is. Or we just have to do it that way. You know? She treated me, and my dad did too, like a human being too, like as a person, not that they were just raising, but, and I think about my own kids. I just told Aaron, I said, what about if we sit down and ask them, because we have, our 2 boys are Christians, how's it going? How are you feeling? Do you have questions? Do you have concerns? Have real conversations.
Are you
Make
struggling?
it a relationship with them.
Yeah. See, because I think a lot of times we assume our children don't have any struggles. You know, they're at home. Mom and dad pretty much still, even at 17, pretty much keeps care of everything, keeps everything squared away. They got food on the table, clothes on their back, and all that. So we say, what do they got to worry about? And speaking of that, I remember I was teaching the high school class, and I said, oh, you guys ain't got no stress. What are y'all stressed out about? Man, I'll tell you what. They got fired up. What do you mean we ain't got any stress? We got this, we got that. Where am I going to go to college? Who you hang out with? Blah, 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 blah. And I said, okay. I messed up. I didn't realize you guys were stressing out so much. But they do. They do have problems. They do think about things. They do stress. And it really shocked me. It really shocked me. I'm like, what do y'all got to worry about, man? Y'all ain't got nothing to do. Nothing. They let me know in a hurry. There was a lot going on in their lives that they were stressing out about. And I don't want to leave parents, but I'll take one more comment for Linda, but I want to get to our spouses next. Where's the microphone? Okay, I got somebody over here. Okay, Ryan?
A minute ago, you talked about how we end up acting like our parents.
Yeah.
I find myself quoting my parents a lot. Like, my dad says, or my mom says
Yeah.
this. It rubs off on us.
It does. It does. It really does. Especially with discipline. Restriction. Where do we learn restriction from? Our parents. Where do we, just about everything that you can think of, especially when it comes to, I guess I'm really focused on discipline because I was just full of myself, you might say, when I was that age. So I had a lot of discipline applied. And that was with the belt, by the way. That wasn't go to your rug and sit on it. My mom was fantastic at warming up your bottom. I'm telling you what. The belt hung on the little, there was a little door thing there, and it had the little belt, and you hear the jingle, you know what's coming. So I'd start to crying, right, before I even got hit. And you don't hush that crying up, I'm going to really give you something to cry about. You know, how many times have we heard that? All that stuff we learn. So what do we tell our kids? You don't hush that up, I'm going to really give you something to cry about. Of course, I don't know how many spank their children anymore. I won't get into that today, but we do that. We learn so much from our parents. And I think I had one more. Linda, yes. Go ahead. Yeah, there it is.
We would try to, well, what we did is we looked at the schedule, and if that particular league practiced on Wednesday night or Sunday, we didn't do it. When they were at Lakeside Middle School, the first string football team, 4 of the kids, 3 were from Lakeside and 1 was from another church. And the coach said, we're going to have practices on Wednesday night. And we told the coach, all of us from Lakeside, the parents told the coach, our kids will not be at practice. And so the coach said, well, they will have to sit out the first quarter in the game. And we said, okay, fine. So when they lost the game, he changed the day of the practice.
You know, that's interesting because that's kind of how it works sometimes. Remember the old, what was that, Chariots of Fire? That movie there where the guy wouldn't, I think he was running in races and he wouldn't race on Sunday. But it's kind of the same philosophy, you know, if we, and so what, they set out the first quarter. What if he'd have done that all year long? Okay, we're still attending church. We're still setting priorities. And one more. But good comments. Yes, sir.
Yeah. I would say this doesn't apply just to like parents and kids. This applies in general. That usually we only take in about 10% of what we hear, but 90% of what we see
Or feel.
that people act, enact in their lives. So if I want to know how to conduct myself in my job, you know, I'll look at my boss and see what they do and how they react and how they speak. If I want to know how to overcome a complication, I'll, you know, think about what did mom do? What did dad do? What did grandma and grandpa do? And so, yeah, it is more about how you conduct yourself in general, even when you think kids or other people or workers or whoever are not paying attention.
I agree. And that's a good point. And when we become the bosses, people are looking at us. How do we conduct ourselves? How do we do our business? Are we honest? Are we fair? Do we treat everybody the same? You know, all those things that I think Jesus would have done if he had been the boss. But, you know, we need to do. But let's just move on to the spouse real quick. He says he that loves, I'm not going to just use wife, I'm just going to use spouse. Love our spouse more than me. And we can really get into some good stuff on this one. And right off the bat, I'd like to commend all our folks that in here that come to services on Sunday without their spouse. It has to be difficult, but I do commend you for doing that because you are still making a statement. You still are showing your faith, and I don't have anything against you. Matter of fact, I lift you up, and I think that has something to do with what he's talking about here. What if, and we always talk about, when I grow up, I want to marry a Christian, and we do, but reality is a lot of times that doesn't happen. A lot of times we marry, and myself, my wife is not a Christian when I got married. A couple of years. And I know I'm not the only one in here that maybe married someone that wasn't a member of the church. Now, was I lucky? Was I blessed because my wife became a member of the church? Yes. Does that always happen? No. And what happened to the children of Israel? He said, I tell you what, y'all guys go in there, I want you to wipe out everyone in there. And it sounds so cruel to us. But why did he want them to dispose of those folks? Because they would lead them away, right? Give our husbands, give our sons as husbands, our daughters as wives. They'll get connected in here, and what they do, they're going to pull them away. See, and that can happen. That can happen to us. And we've kind of talked about that already, where, you know, maybe one spouse is faithful and then the other one is not, and the path of least resistance, you know, I don't want to go to church. I want to be like Dad. He don't go to church. I want to be like Mom. She's going to stay home, get lunch ready for Dad when he gets home. You know, what are our kids learning? What are our kids learning? And I don't think there's anybody in here who don't love the person sitting next to him more than anybody in the world. The two shall become one, right? We love our spouse. Don't want anything. Guys, I know in a heartbeat we would sacrifice ourselves. That's probably the only time we'd do any sacrificing for our spouse, our children. But what if? They're hindering us. We love them more than we do Jesus. Okay. Difficult. Difficult. Well, I'm just going to stay home this Sunday. Be with my spouse. Next month, I'm going to stay home a couple Sundays. And you see how it starts? It influences us. Yes, Elizabeth.
You bring out a lot of good points, Steve. You know, that is a challenging situation, but, you know, at the end of the day, every Christian must remember Christianity is individual.
Correct.
And so if your spouse is, you know, you want to live before them a godly life, so perhaps they may become stronger in the faith or may become a Christian. You always want to do that. The scriptures teach us that. But at the end of the day, I have to decide whether or not I'm going to keep growing, whether or not I'm going to have a deeper relationship with God. It's not a package deal. And so if we could ever get that ingrained in our mind, my spouse may not want to grow any further, but I got to keep going. And I'm going to keep praying for them, and perhaps that they may get on board and continue to abound in the Lord. But I have to save Elizabeth and put the oxygen on Elizabeth first.
That's correct. That's correct.
And perhaps other people, I can help them put the oxygen mask on, you know, by sharing the gospel, living before them in a godly way. But at the end of the day, I have to save myself. And I'm going to grow. You have to make purpose in your mind. I'm going to grow regardless of my spouse and whatever influence they may have.
Correct.
So.
Yeah, because when we stand in front of the Lord, he's not going to say, Frank, what happened to Elizabeth? You know? See, when we stand, we have our cross to bear. When we stand in front of the good Lord one day, it doesn't matter about anybody else. You're on the stand. Steve, let's look at your life. See? And I think that's what Elizabeth's getting at. We're all individual, and we all got to stand before the good Lord one day and give account of ourselves. And that's a good point. Yes, Lane.
Yeah, your stats. Well, the stats about couples where one of the persons is not a Christian, it's like 80% the marriage is going to fail.
Okay.
That's the stats I've read. So you got fortunate there. You're in the 20%.
Good.
So good for you.
Very
I mean,
good.
it can happen, but it's more likely not to last.
Yes.
When you don't marry a Christian.
Yes, and don't misunderstand me, folks, when I'm saying when I say that. I mean, I highly recommend that we marry a Christian, but reality is sometimes we don't, and that's my point. But we still need to be a Christian. Jim.
When I was preaching for another congregation in another state, we had a gospel meeting that had been scheduled before I had moved there. And this was back when the preacher who was visiting and holding a meeting, the meetings went on for a week sometimes, maybe longer, back when
I remember them days.
People's attention spans were longer. And anyway, he told me he was a great preacher. He said, I'm a preacher because of my wife, because she married me. I wasn't a Christian, and I didn't go to church. I didn't intend to go, but she went every service. And Saturday night, she would always polish the children's shoes, and she'd put them up there on the counter. And he said, those shoes haunted me for years.
Okay.
What has she got to go to that's so important and that she takes my children to it? And he finally started attending, and somebody studied with him. And he became a great gospel preacher because of those shoes.
Yeah, great. And that's the good side, and that's the positive, and that happens a lot. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes our spouses never attend. Sometimes they remain unfaithful. Sometimes they may make it difficult. But just remember, folks, we've all going to stand individually one day in front of the Lord. We all got to give an account for ourselves. You know, he's talking about bearing our cross, and you know that's the underlying theme here. What I'm getting at, no matter what happens, what all the stuff that happens in our life, we still got to stand in front of the Lord one day. Still got to give an account. When he pulls out that card catalog, you know, and all those. The good thing about being a Christian, when he pulls that out, it's empty. Okay? All our mess and all the stuff that we've goofed up, all of our sins, gone. See, there's nothing in there that will condemn us because of the blood of Christ. See, that's the great thing about being a Christian and living faithful. We stand account. Well done. Well done. Jennifer.
Just to reiterate what Elizabeth said, you can marry a Christian, and that's not a guarantee. I can personally attest to that.
Yes, that's true.
And I think sometimes, especially those of us who are raised in the church, we get comfortable, and we think, so long as I marry I call it a COC, a Church of Christer, I can just skate. I'm free. But you're not. Because like we've said, at the end of the day, you're responsible for you.
That's
Even
right.
what Juan had said, you know, about people who are faced with, you know, being torn away from their families. Same thing with, you know, when you marry a Christian, that's a great idea and it's a great concept. And yes, your chances are much better at both of you getting to heaven. But at the end of the day, you, like you said, and I loved what they said, God's not going to say, so what about your spouse? He's going to say, what about you?
Yep, and I agree. And that's a good point. Nothing, you know, even when they talk about, you know, raising up your children and the admonition and the training of the Lord, and when he gets old, he won't forget, you know, that is true probably 99% of the time, but there's always that one. And the same thing with marrying a Christian. Sometimes our spouses, even though they claim to be Christians, may not walk the walk. But still, that doesn't take anything away from us. You know, and I've said it once, I've said it 100 times. You can come here every time the doors are open and sit and get comfortable on these pews and not live the life outside of those doors, it's not going to help you. He talks about the lukewarm Christians, and I think that's, in my opinion, I think that's who he's pointing to. You know, oh, I go to church, but that's it. I don't do anything. I don't go anywhere. I don't tell anybody. I don't live the life. I just show up and sit on the pew. Keep the elders off my back. That way I won't get a visit, see? Anyway, I appreciate it. I had a lot more in there, but it's good stuff when you get to talking about the cost of being a disciple. And I appreciate your response. Thank you very much.